Hey everybody, just getting set up so that I can be ready when Paul's ready to join. Unlike last time, go ahead and get everything ready to go so I can see comments, get it shared before he even joins to make this easier on me. So guys, just bear with me. Let me know if anybody can see it, so that will help me know that I'm actually live. Good morning, everybody. All right. Sorry, guys, just getting this shared so that when Paul joins me, it's not something I have to do after he joins. So it's easier. Anyway, okay. What's up, y'all? Nice. Thank you for letting me know you can see me, Lou, and Wee Miz, everybody out there. Trying to get this shared before Paul gets here. So hopefully everybody knows we're about to go get it going. Good morning. I'm kind of awake. Got coffee in one cup and water in the other. All right. Dun, dun, dun. So anyway, sorry guys, just getting this shared until I hear Paul join me. Still got a minute or two. Anybody knows any better earbuds than these kind? Y'all let me know. These things are painful. Just saying. All right. All right, I think Paul is with us. Good morning. How are you doing this morning? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Lynette?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
We're good?
We're good. Do you ever see the television show Ozark?
I started to watch it and then my daughter and I got busy doing something else and I didn't finish it. I think I've seen like one episode.
Yeah, Ruth Langmore is the person who reminds me of you. The tone of your voice is very similar to her.
No, I'm gonna have to look her up.
Your favorite character on the show? You'll love her.
Oh, funny. How funny. Well, I don't know what all's happened in the last 2 weeks since we talked, but it's definitely, I'm sure it's been interesting out there in the world. And I want to say welcome back, everybody. You're watching Tough Love with Lynette. This is my second show coming back after rebranding and getting back out there. I was Forsaken Generation in the past and had to switch it up because that was just too doom and gloom. You know, I'm all about love and hope, so we had to change it up a little bit. So welcome back, Paul. Thank you for joining me, or should I say Dr. Offit? I'm just used to talking to you as friend. So but so I'm going to jump right in here and ask you some questions that popped in my head just from talking to you 2 weeks ago, just to see kind of what the differences may be. So where are we at on infected and deaths now compared to 2 weeks ago when we spoke? How are we faring right now out in the country compared to the tests they are doing? And I'm not sure the accuracy, but what are you hearing out there?
So on March 26th, we had 1,000 deaths. We went to 2,000 2 days later. We went from 2,000 to 4,000 on April 1st, so that was 4 days later. Went from 4,000 to 8,500 again in 4 days. So the doubling time of 4 days. Went from 8,500 to 18,000 in 5 days. So now you've gone from 2 to 4 to 5 days. We haven't quite gotten to 36,000 yet. We're around 32,000. So probably the doubling time has gone now to 7 days. You know, that's good. I mean, that's all bad. I mean, it's all bad that people die, but I'm just saying the original goal was to try and prevent the healthcare system from being overwhelmed. That was the goal, and being so-called flatten the curve, because you wanted to be able to take care of not just these patients, but any patients who required acute or intensive care I think we're there. I think we've done what we wanted to do there. Now the question is, as we slowly get back to work, will there be a bump that we can't handle? And so what I think we need to do is slowly get back. I don't, it just, other countries have done this much better than we have. You look at Germany, for example, they now have extensive testing. They know who's infected. They know who has antibodies in their bloodstream that now is likely to protect them. And so they're now starting to go back to work. I mean, they're a country of 80 million people. If you extrapolate the number of deaths they had to our country, they would have half the deaths that we had. So they did this much better than we did it. There's no reason we shouldn't have done this well. We have the same level of scientific expertise. We certainly have the resources to do it. We just didn't do it. And we'll see how this plays out. But I really do think what we're about to experience is the second phase of this public health disaster, which is massive joblessness. We're already at 22 million people who have applied for unemployment insurance. Those are just people who could figure out how to do it. We're able to get through the telephones to do it, and not including the people who are undocumented who are here that can't do it. So we're going to have 35 million unemployed Americans. That's 20% of the workforce. We're at the levels where we were in the Great Depression. We need to find some way in a surgical, 1 foot at a time, get back to work strategy. And we're just all over the place on this. Hopefully we can do this, because we're about for round 2. Joblessness leads to homelessness, especially among the poor, and homelessness leads to food insecurity and domestic violence and child abuse and suicide and everything else that comes with that. I just wish we would take that part of it a little more seriously, because it's tragedy number 2.
Yeah, it's very scary out here. I mean, it really is. I've seen a lot of crazy things I don't want to get into, but it's very scary out here. And I've talked to so many people who are like me, who are single moms or single dads, who are really going through it right now. And I got to tell you, their morale is just going down further and further. And it seems to be causing a lot of domestic issues, and it seems to be causing a lot of other problems. So, I really do hope we get this under control, because, I don't know how much longer people are going to sit still. And honestly, I'm seeing a lot of people now getting out in different states protesting the lockdown. So that's become kind of interesting to me. There's been, I think, 3 or 4 states in the last week who have gotten out and protested the lockdown quarantine. So anyway, so where do you think we're at now on what are the numbers of unemployment looking like, and things of that nature? Have you heard any new numbers on that this week?
Well, so it went from 3.3 million, then another 6 million got you to roughly 10 million. Then it was another 6 million, got to 16 million. Now it's another 6 million. This is 4 weeks in a row. Now you're at 22 million. And that's just the people who can apply. I think this is a nightmare. And I just wish we had, and I'm not sure how best to do this. And maybe it shouldn't be done at the federal level. Or maybe it shouldn't even be done at the state level. Maybe it should just be done at the local level. I mean, Pennsylvania is 2 big cities, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, with rural areas in the middle. Maybe it should be done at the mayoral level, right? I mean, who wins wars? It's the sergeants that win wars. So maybe it should be done at the mayoral level, and not even at the governor or federal level. But because I think different communities have different needs and are spaced out differently and have different kinds of employment situations. So maybe it should be done more locally than it's being done, but it should be done. I mean, I think what's happened is we scared the hell out of people. People are panicked. They are
right
about this virus. And I think what makes this virus so heinous is I think it's obviously much more than just respiratory spread. I mean, there is a fomite compartment or component of this. So hand washing, surfaces. I think this reminds me actually of the early days of AIDS. That's when I first came into medicine, because I'm like an old person.
It kind of flashes me back to these old flu. I have all these old advertisements from back in the day, from medicine, from heroin to cocaine to vaccines, to all kinds of stuff that I found over the years, and kind of crazy. And one of the things I have is an old flu shot poster that used to hang in a pharmacy, and it says "Panic in the streets," and it's got "Panic, panic, get your flu shot now," and it has the name of the pharmacy and the address, and it's like, good Lord, if you weren't trying to freak people out. I mean, literally, it's like, panic in the streets, get your flu shot. Like, okay, yeah, that wouldn't scare me if I was, I mean, I'm sure it freaked a few people out. Like, maybe I should go in here and do this. Sometimes people do things just out of fear. And this is one of those times where as we said, 2 weeks ago, a lot of steps have been skipped here. So we really don't want people just rushing out in fear. We really want a lot more testing to be done, and some other things to happen before they just start giving this out in mass quantity.
Yeah, I think when AIDS first hit, nobody knew what caused it. I mean, it was assumed it was a virus, but we hadn't proven that yet. And nobody really knew clearly how it was spread. And so people were just scared to touch anything. They were scared to pick up a piece of fruit at the grocery store. I mean, that's how panicked everybody was. And that's what you feel now. You go to the grocery store here and it's like, everybody's got their gloves on, they got their masks on. It's less like a scene out of 28 Days Later. People are just scared to touch anything. And I'll be curious to see it when this all settles out, exactly how we'll interact with people in the future, because I'm sure this is going to hit us. I mean, this is as scarring as 9/11 was.
I know. I was thinking about that. I was curious, like, are we all going to come out of hiding, and are we going to greet each other and hug each other like we've missed human contact so much? Or is it going to be the opposite direction, where we're all kind of like, don't come near me, you might have the COVID? Or, I mean, you know what I mean? I know it might be a little bit of both. I think it's going to be really interesting for sure. Oh, goodness gracious. I mean, you never know, right? A lot of people, they do let things trip them out a little bit. And a lot of people look for that next thing to freak them out. People kind of enjoyed the adrenaline rush of the next crazy thing. So, you got a lot of people like that too, are just enjoying the hype that there's something's happening in their lifetime. As crazy as that is, I've heard a lot of people just excited something happened, oh, I witnessed this, I was alive during this. It's like, you're insane, Oh my goodness. But hey, everybody's different, I guess. So I guess I'm going to hop on in here, and I'm going to get to some questions from some friends and doctors and other people like that I associate with and are in my buddies. So let's see here. So how advantageous to create unemployment when deaths of desperation will escalate, perhaps higher than the death of COVID-19? What do you think about a vaccine where pathogenic priming is a reality? Should we lock down everyone?
I'm not sure what he means by, if he means pathogenic priming is a reality. I think that if you're infected with COVID-19, I think you are going to be protected against that virus for years, not decades, but years. I don't think the virus mutates. I mean, it mutates, a single-stranded RNA virus, so it mutates a little, much like measles or mumps or rubella does, but I don't think it's going to become a different serotype. This is not flu. I don't think it's going to mutate away from a vaccine that we, so hoping that we can make a vaccine. But so I think you'll be protected. But I think the only real way to get population immunity, the only real way to rid this infection is the same way we rid measles, which is with a vaccine. I mean, I was a child of the 50s. I had measles when I was, less than 10 years of age. That protected me for the rest of my life. Everybody who got measles was protected for the rest of their life. But nonetheless, every year there'd be 2 to 3 million cases of measles. The only way we really stop measles, was with a vaccine. And I think that's true. I think that's your only real option. Although what's interesting, that study that just came out of Germany, that there were so many more people that had been when they did serological studies. I mean, because that's the best way to figure out who's been infected and who hasn't, because a lot of people are infected without symptoms. So when they tested their blood to see whether they had antibodies against COVID-19, a significant portion of the population was infected. I think that's true here. I mean, we can talk all we want about how there's 600,000 cases. Those are just the people who've been tested, which has been in a haphazard and sporadic way. I think there could be 6 million people who've been infected, or 10 million people who've been infected. That's perfectly possible. When we do the serological studies, we'll find out, should we ever actually get around to doing those studies.
Yeah, I was curious what you thought about that, if we're, how we're going to get to that point where we can actually test to see if, we have the antibodies to this, or, how, is that something that are we closer to them being able to test people and say, okay, you can go back to work because you've now had this and you're immune, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I was just on Inside Edition the other day, because, where else would I be? And the question was, what do you think about the validity of a home antibody test from China that people can buy off Craigslist, which is like, like a question that answers itself. But I think the answer is probably a little suspicious of that. But can you, first of all, can you make a serological test that's specific, meaning that's specific for this virus? Absolutely. This is very different actually than human coronaviruses. They're more like a cousin than a brother or sister. So yes, you can make a specific test. What does that test tell you? I think and you can do this, you can even do this as a home antibody test. I mean, if it's done right, you can see whether or not you have one of two different kinds of antibodies. Whether you have the first antibody that you make when you're infected is called immunoglobulin M, and then over time you make an antibody called immunoglobulin G. I think if you're immunoglobulin M positive, you could still be shedding virus. I think that's true. And you're not necessarily protected yet. I think when you get to the immunoglobulin G and the M goes away, I think you're protected. And that's great news. Now you've created an army of people who are protected, who can go to work, who can work in the healthcare system without fear, who can go to nursing homes and work, who can visit people in nursing homes, who can help people shop who can't get out. I mean, it would be very helpful to know who's been infected, to give you a sense of where things stand. It's just so pathetic how bad we've been at testing in this country. It's just, I mean, Germany is just so far ahead of us on this. They've already got testing in place. They're already getting back to work. They've had, purportedly it's a country of 80 million people, so they're roughly a fourth of our country. But if you extrapolate out, they've had half our deaths. Why are they so much better at this than we are?
Right. Well, you're right. That's a great question. Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know the answer to that, Paul. If I did, I'd answer. You know most of the answers to my questions, so I'll keep asking you questions. It seems to go better that direction. Oh my goodness. So this question's from one of my doctor buddies. How will they measure success with SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 vaccine? I am assuming that success is measured like any other vaccine trial, the development of antibodies against COVID-2.
Again, you don't really know what antibody response correlates with protection. You don't know that. You can develop virus neutralizing antibodies, which is what you want to develop because that neutralizes the virus, keeps the virus from binding to cells. But you don't know what level of neutralizing antibodies is protective. The only way you're going to figure out whether or not a vaccine is of value is to do a large placebo-controlled prospective study. And the size of that study will depend on what the attack rate is at the time the study is done. I imagine the study will be done in healthcare workers because they're on the front lines. And that's what it would have to be. People are talking now about doing studies of a few thousand people. I'd be surprised if that was big enough to answer the question about safety or efficacy. I think those studies would have to be bigger than that.
All right, so are you concerned that they're skipping animal trials and going immediately to human trials? If SARS-CoV-1 or RSV vaccine worked, why is it not available?
Well, first of all, the SARS and MERS vaccines, those programs were suspended. They really never got to a point of an efficacy trial because the virus disappeared. I mean, those viruses were both one and done deals, both SARS-1 and MERS. So we don't know. Does it bother me that they skipped animal trials, at least for the Moderna vaccine, the mRNA vaccine? So mRNA, induces, it's translated to a protein, and the protein is that spike protein on the surface, and that's what you want. That's the protein you care about. The advantage of animal model, there's two advantages to animal model studies. First of all, it's hard to make an animal model. In other words, you would have to take an animal, whatever it is, mouse, rat, whatever, and you would have to inoculate it with COVID-19, and it would have to develop symptoms similar to what people do. That's not always true. There's a lot of vaccines for which you don't have a really good animal model. I mean, we were fortunate in the rotavirus world that mice got diarrhea when you gave the rotavirus, so that enables us to answer the questions about the vaccine. But so the good things about trials is it enables you to do proof of concept. So, I mean, there's so many different ways you could make this vaccine. This is why the part I don't understand here, I don't understand how this can be done in a year and a half. I don't see that. Obviously, I'm missing something because many people are saying that. But the advantage of a trial of doing animal model studies is it enables you to prove the concept. Because right now, what we don't know is, what's this vaccine going to look like? Is it going to be a whole killed virus like the polio vaccine? Is it going to be a live weakened virus like the measles vaccine? Is it going to be a purified protein vaccine like the hepatitis B or poliovirus vaccine? Is it going to be something completely different? Is it going to be a genetic vaccine like an mRNA or DNA vaccine for which there exists no vaccines? I mean, there is not an mRNA vaccine. Now there's not a DNA vaccine. So that's a new platform. And with new things come potentially new platforms.
Well, it makes a difference too for people who, I mean, everyone's different. Like, my daughter with her going through the autoimmune neutropenia, you know, one of the things that they've said for her is if she ever was vaccinated again, she was not to ever receive a live virus vaccine. So, you know, there are different people who, you know, depending on how they created it, how they made it, who couldn't take it, you know, regardless. But who knows if, you know, that's going to be something people are thinking about when there's a rush and a panic.
Right, she needs to be protected by those around her. So, I mean, so what, and when you do those trials, traditionally, we want to make sure that it's a large representative population of America, so that you have all sort of genetic backgrounds. You have the right proportion of African Americans, Asian Americans, et cetera. So you know that when this gets out there to millions of people, that you have had a very good look. I just can't imagine how this couldn't be done in many thousands of people beforehand. And I don't see how that all gets done so quickly, but we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll see how this plays out. I mean, if you ask me, what do I think is a reasonable timeline, assuming everything worked well, assuming that the phase 1 and phase 2 trials worked well, that you were able to do an efficacy trial, and see clearly that you had that you knew now what was your immunological correlative protection. I think that would take 5 years, but I'm obviously missing something, because, you know, people are saying, governors are saying, and even Dr. Fauci is saying, you know, I think we can't have large scale sporting events until there's a vaccine. I am a Philadelphia Eagles season ticket holder. You know, this is getting personal. I'm sorry. That's a
Right.
joke.
Well, you know what? That made me giggle. Well, I want to ask you this, knowing that they've skipped a lot of the steps here, and you saying, I would guess 5 would be a minimum coming from you, I would think, because I know, you know, you've said 20 to 25 years is, you know, how long many of them have taken. I would guess 5 would be a minimum to get somewhere, I would guess. But if they were to bring this out to the regular population very shortly from now, is it something you would take yourself? I know I would not.
It depends on the data. I mean, if there were, I mean, I'm on the FDA's vaccine advisory committee. If this goes through the FDA, we'll be able to see the data. What I'd like to see is clear evidence that this is safe, and that it's effective. I mean, and also at the time that it comes out, to what extent is this virus still, you know, ravaging the community?
Right.
I mean, all those things come into play.
What's the need, right? What's the need versus the risk?
And then who most benefits? I mean, how would you roll this out? Who would be the people you first like to target? And so I think the answer to the question is it depends what the data look like. I mean, the advantage of a vaccine, of the vaccine going before the FDA's vaccine advisory committee is then the public gets to see those data. I mean, because those are open meetings, like the ACIP meetings that you go to, those are open meetings, so the public can see those data for themselves.
Right. Yeah, and those are always a lot of fun and very interesting. I'm actually hoping we actually get to go to June's meeting. It's seeming like the world just keeps being shut down. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't like to miss a meeting. They might break my heart. We might be all watching on the live stream and nobody might be showing up. We'll all be Skyping into the conference. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you never know. All right, so why do you think the death rates have varied so much? Italy, the worst, 10%, versus France at about 4%, versus Germany, the best is 0.57%, China 3 to 4%, versus South Korea 0.7%. The number of people tested will play a role in these numbers. The more asymptomatic or minimally ill people you test, the lower your death rate. The problem is that testing between the European countries is similar. Age is the other issue. About 22% of Italy is over 65 and only 12% of France is over 65. The problem here is that 20% of Germany is over 65, so age alone doesn't explain it. Do you think that the virus will burn out and be like other serious coronavirus outbreaks? Or do you think that this will be a new annual event like influenza? Neither SARS or MERS became annual. They both burned out and are gone. If there is one and done type virus, why are we developing a vaccine? Wouldn't it make so much more sense to figure out how to treat the virus? Something that can be applied to the next coronavirus that comes along, rather than a vaccine that will only treat one strain.
All right, so there were a few questions in there. I'll start with remember it. I think there's a lot of different factors that go into why one country has a higher death rate than another. I think one is age, true. Italy has an older population. The number I saw was, I think it was 23% were over 65 years of age. The other thing is comorbidities. I mean, what percentage of the population have those other comorbidities? And the three big ones are high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. The other thing is availability of intensive care units and the quality of intensive care units care in those countries. I mean, Italy is primarily affected, not so much the area around Rome, as more the area around Milan, where, you know, it's a more rural area. I think the intensive care there may not have been as good as it would have been in other countries. So I think there's a lot of different factors. And your questioner asked the right question, which is that part of that has to do with who's infected. And the only way to know really who's infected is by doing serial epidemiological studies. In terms of what's going to happen to this virus, I mean, SARS and MERS were different. So SARS and MERS were both novel coronaviruses. SARS came out of Southeast Asia, is about 50% bat coronavirus. MERS came out of Saudi Arabia, is partially a camel coronavirus. Those viruses were one and done deals. I don't think this virus is going to be that. Those viruses made you sick. I mean, if you were infected with those viruses, you had moderate to severe disease. There wasn't what we see here, which is that 80% of these cases are either asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. That wasn't true for those viruses. In some ways, that made it easier to contain them because you knew who was sick, you could put a motor around them. And so they became one and done deals. I'm sure that, you know, a large percentage of the world's population is still susceptible to those two viruses, yet they've gone away. So that's not it. It's not that suddenly everybody's immune. So now you have this virus, which spreads obviously much more easily. And I think what makes it so heinous is you don't know who's infected. And also there is a fomite component to this. This acts a little more like norovirus in some ways. You know, it's cruise ships, nursing homes, surfaces. And I think that's why I think it's not going to go away in the summer. I think you're going to see it in the summer because it is such a fomite thing, you know, such a surface and hand washing thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think it'll come back. I suspect it'll come back less and less strongly each time, but we'll see. I don't know. It's a bat coronavirus. It's just made its debut into the human population. Who knows how it's going to act? We'll see.
Yeah, kind of hard to predict what it's going to do when it's new. I mean, I kind of get that. I mean, makes sense to me. Kind of got to see what happens and watch for next season. So why do you think that children appear to have a much less severe course of this disease? Even very young children appear to be spared the mortality of the older people. This is not the case with influenza.
Exactly right. You'd think I might know the answer to that. I'm a pediatric infectious disease specialist. I don't. If you look at flu, take the 2009-2010 flu pandemic. That virus killed 12,000 people, just that one virus. I mean, we also had epidemic flu that year, but just that one pandemic flu virus killed 12,000 people. Only 20% were over 65. I mean, that virus killed healthy young people. This year, COVID-19 has killed in the United States 32,000 people. I think fewer than 5 are children. I mean, it spares children. We did have one death in our hospital, but so maybe it's more than 5, but I can't believe it's more than 10. And there's 32,000 deaths. I mean, most of those deaths are in the greater than 60, but most of those deaths are in New York. I mean, it's New York, right. New Jersey. Most of them are in people who are over 65 who have comorbidities. But I mean, how many children have died of influenza this year in the United States? 155. How many have died of COVID-19? 5. So why? So it's not, there's nothing unique about children that they can't die from viral infections or respiratory viral infections. I don't know what it is about this. I don't think it has anything to do with human coronaviruses, which, you know, spread in the population all the time, that somehow that may provide some immunity. I don't think that's it. Maybe it has to do with maturation of receptors. In other words, when a virus binds to a cell, it usually binds to a specific receptor. In this case, the name of that receptor is angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE receptor. Maybe there's a difference in the expression of that receptor on cells in younger versus older people. That's true of rotavirus. In rotavirus, it's the rare less than 6-month-old who gets infected. It's really a 6-month to 24-month-old infection, primarily because of maturation of receptors. So that might be part of it. I haven't seen any data on that.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious about that too, because it seems kind of interesting to me that children were spared. I've seen, you know, all these news stories with 6-month, you know, old, who, you know, children who have recovered and doing just fine. And So I do understand it does seem to be more the elderly, and it definitely, if you have like a comorbid condition, you know, I have friends who have diabetes, or, you know, like I have many different heart issues, and, you know, people have been panicking for me. They're like, don't get out, you have heart problems and blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. But, you know, I mean, a lot of people are really worried who have these other issues, who are older. And I think it's kind of odd too, because for me personally, when I do have to get out and about, that's who I see out and about. That's who's all not at home right now. That's all the people breaking this quarantine who really aren't listening, is older people. And I don't know if that's just kind of once you get a certain age, it's like, I do what I want, you know, or, you know, kind of what it is. But for me personally, around Alabama, it seems like a lot of the people who are still out and about, who are not, you know, going with the lockdown thing, are older people. So it seems interesting also that they're the ones being affected the most. And maybe because they're a little unruly, just being real.
Actually, I would think, I haven't sensed that here. I mean, I'm in southern New Jersey right now, but in Philly, I haven't seen that either. I see people walking around, but it's usually older people. I haven't seen that here.
Well, Alabama's a little different. I'm not sure. I think like Southern people have that, and like, you know, rebellious attitude. I don't know. I'm just saying. So let's see here. So given the flu numbers every year, 20 to 50,000 deaths with hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations, why are we having so much difficulty managing similar or less numbers of patient hospitalizations? Although the flu seasons run from September to April, most of the cases cluster in peaks that far exceed our current COVID-2 numbers, usually 2 to 3 peaks per year spread over a few weeks. Why are hospitals all of a sudden unable to handle COVID-2 cases? Do we have so many influenza cases currently that we can't handle these COVID-2 cases? Why are we treating these patients with different precautions than we treat influenza patients?
Good question. I think that there was an answer actually within that question. I do think flu, I mean, there's been as many as 700,000 hospitalizations with flu, and up to, you know, as many as 65,000 deaths from flu, both of which are probably greater than what we're seeing with COVID-19. But it's spread out. I mean, so as the person who asked the question said, I think, you know, we start to see those cases really in September, October, and then they spread out in April or May. My dog just walked in, by the way. Come here. See? Our dog.
Aww, that's adorable.
Hi, Rose. Come on, say hi. Say hi. Say hi to Lynette.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Everybody meet Dr. Offit's dog. How funny.
So I think one is that it's spread out, because you're right. I mean, the burden of the illness for influenza is certainly not only equal to, greater to that of COVID-19, at least for now. But you know, COVID-19 really didn't come into this country. It didn't start. You didn't start to see people dying in this country from COVID-19 until the beginning of March. So that, you know, we have a much more, and then it's swept across, you know, these
right.
regions, especially the Northeast, where half the deaths have occurred.
Right. Well, okay. I kind of noticed that too. So I guess we'll just that was a good answer for me. Hopefully, my friend who asked the question, was a good answer for you too. Yeah, I told you I have some good friends. Blood plasma is being used for COVID from COVID immune Americans who built up natural antibodies, and being given to those extremely ill with COVID. If a vaccine was available, could this same scenario work with a vaccine immunity? Why or why not? And which do you think would work better, natural immunity plasma or vaccine plasma?
When you're infected with a natural virus, you develop, best of worlds, I think most people will develop high titered neutralizing antibodies against that virus. That's good. In terms of whether or not that would work to treat someone, it depends at the stage that you treat them. Because what happens is you're infected with the virus reproduces itself, you make an immune response to the virus replication or capacity to reproduce itself decreases as your immune response starts to kill virus-infected cells. Now you're sick, now you're sicker, now you're coming to the intensive care unit. And so then the question becomes, to what extent viral replication is still an important part of the disease process at the time that you give the antibodies. And it's variable. I mean, we went through this with polio. Polio, before there was a polio vaccine, you know, people used convalescent sera. What doesn't worry me about the convalescent sera is I don't think it would be dangerous, because I think it is being directed against the protein on that surface of that virus the way it's meant to be directed, which is to say, it's natural. The conformation of that of that protein on the surface is natural by definition. You're infected with the natural virus. Regarding vaccines, I think that it depends. I'm not worried about a live attenuated viral vaccine. I think there the protein on the surface of the virus will look just like it does on the virus. And it's true of measles, true of mumps, true of rubella, true of varicella, chickenpox. So that doesn't worry me. I think when you have a protein that's not naturally on the virus, not as part of the natural virus, whether it's purified protein or whether it's a DNA or mRNA vaccine, you want to make sure that the immune response, and this is doable, this is knowable, those who do these experiments will be doing those studies. You want to make sure you have a high titers of neutralizing antibodies and not just non-neutralizing binding antibodies. You have to find that out. I mean, and that it's long lived. In other words, that it's not just higher titer neutralizing agents, but that they're longer lived than the binding antibodies, because binding antibodies can cause this thing we talked about earlier, so-called antibody-dependent enhancement. So I think that's doable. It's knowable. I'd like to think we do know that before we launch a program like this. And I always worry when things are truncated and shortened, that that corners get cut and bad things can happen. But I'm choosing to believe that we're going to do the right kind of studies in this before we would ever launch this vaccine for the American public. So the short answer to the question is, I have no problems with the convalescent immunity sera. When you're generating that immune response from the vaccines, you want to make sure that it looks just like the convalescent sera does. But in any case, your best bet is just to get a vaccine, because assuming it works and is safe, because now you have your own immunological memory. You don't have to have this passive antibody transfer.
Okay. All righty. So let's see here. This is a question related to vaccines in general. And this is from a friend of mine, but they want to know if you're in favor for the manufacturers to have liability instead of it falling on like the kangaroo court kind of system that it does now with the DICP. Do you believe that like drugs, it should be more like the manufacturers, or do you think that do you like the way that it's run now with the VICP court and things of that nature?
Well, so I don't consider the vaccine injury compensation program a kangaroo court. You can, by the way, always.
That's my words, folks. That's my words.
The VICP is round one. If you don't like what happened in the vaccine court, you can sue the manufacturer directly. You can. You have to go through the court first. But if you don't like the settlement or you don't like the judgment, you can go directly to the manufacturer. As a general rule, the bar is fairly low, at least as far as I'm concerned, in vaccine court. Therefore, most people don't go beyond that. But you could if you wanted to. I mean, you may have to pay for your own lawyer. I mean, it may be different in terms of the cost and stuff, but you can still sue the company.
Right. I have a feeling that would probably be pretty expensive.
I think maybe. I don't know. I mean, that I don't know. But I think in terms of liability, I'm not sure. I think, it's when the polio vaccine came out, it was a different time in terms of sort of the degree to which people were litigious or sued, but I don't know. I mean, I know an example. Okay, so an example would be the 1976 swine flu pandemic. When that vaccine was made quickly, it ended up not being a pandemic, so it was wrong. I mean, it was sort of an ill-considered program in some ways. We gave the vaccine to a number of people, and it was a cause of Guillain-Barré syndrome, this ascending paralysis, which can be serious.
Right.
About 1 per 100,000 people who got it. So that was a real side effect, serious side effect caused by that vaccine. The government assumed liability for that product. They sort of took over for the pharmaceutical companies. Would we do that for this vaccine? Would the government sort of take over liability for this vaccine? I guess it's possible. Or would it just go through the vaccine injury compensation program? I don't know. That's good.
Right. I would, that is, and I would think maybe the government it would seem like should kind of take responsibility on that one, just personally. Let's see. With talk of novel adjuvants to boost the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, do you feel there is an increased risk of triggering autoimmune conditions in the vulnerable subgroups?
Right. So you're not going to have adjuvants for a live attenuated viral vaccine. You may or may not have it for a killed vaccine. I mean, polio vaccine is a killed vaccine that doesn't have an adjuvant. the place where you would, and I don't think you would have it for either a DNA or mRNA vaccine, the place you would have it would be a purified protein vaccine like Hep B or human papillomavirus. It's always a concern. I mean, when you give an adjuvant, the purpose is so that you can give lesser quantities of the active ingredient and give fewer doses. That's the purpose of an adjuvant. And they've served us well. I think that there's always a question when you boost the immune system, that if you take a vulnerable population who's more at risk for an immunologically mediated disease like an autoimmune disease, that you would then rev up their immune system to more likely react against them. I mean, this came up especially with HPV vaccine, and that vaccine has now been studied post-licensure in more than 1 million people, looking at 16 different autoimmune diseases, and that vaccine was not found to have done that. We're in the realm of now more powerful adjuvants. I mean, the Hepatitis B vaccine, that third sort of hepatitis B vaccine, has this so-called CpG motif. That's a powerful adjuvant and makes that a particularly effective vaccine. Same thing with the Shingrix vaccine. I mean, those are two powerful adjuvants that induce immune responses in people my age that, are
right. Yeah, I remember the World Health Organization people saying, if you got the Shingrix vaccine, you knew you got that vaccine for sure. I was like, well, yeah, I'm glad. I've actually met a woman who was in the chiropractor's office I was in, and she had gotten the shingles vaccine, and she said, "Woo, this thing packed a wallop." I was like, I don't know.
Right. That first dose, I think about 5% of people miss a day of work after that first dose. But on the other hand, shingles is right up there with the worst pains in medicine. The worst pains in medicine are shingles, corneal abrasions, labor and delivery, and then kidney stones, which is like labor and delivery for men. So I mean, those are the worst ones. And so
I haven't been able to fact check this, but somebody has told me that in 2011, Supreme Court passed a PERP Act saying that we could not sue the manufacturers if we did not win in the ICP court.
That's not true.
Okay, I haven't been able to fact check it. I'm just putting it out there, so I'll have to look it up later. Just telling you, it popped. It's something that's coming up in my stuff. So just throwing that out there. Okay, so with nearly all vaccine safety trials testing,
that made me think it was the thimerosal story. The question was whether thimerosal could be separated from vaccines, or whether that was considered part of the vaccine. Because there was an effort to try and get the thimerosal load out of the vaccine.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, down, and I think only a few of them have it now. And what do they call it? Tiny. I don't remember the word, microdoses or whatever. With nearly all vaccine safety trials testing against a non-inherent placebo or another vaccine, given the risk of fast tracking, might this be the time to get the FDA to test the COVID-19 vaccine against the saline placebo group with statistically significant size to draw an absolute risk conclusion?
Yeah, my preference would be that it would be a placebo control, which would be a saline. But we take the mRNA vaccine, for example. So that vaccine is, I'm not going to worry about the mRNA part. I mean, the messenger RNA is very quickly degraded in the body. You have messenger RNA all the time in your body that's degraded. But in order for that vaccine to be delivered, my understanding is it requires a fairly complex lipid delivery system called DOTAP is the sort of shorter name for that. And, lipids can have side effects, can be inflammatory. So you'd like to think that the control group was not empty lipids. You'd like to think the control group would have been saline, or at least have a 3-arm trial where you have lipids and then saline control. But because I'd like to control for what are possible side effects for the lipid as well. But in any case, well, I guess we'll see how this plays out. There are many trials that we actually on our website, because this question has come up, we have the whole list of sort of placebo-controlled trials that are saline-controlled trials. There are many more than people think.
All right. Let's see here. So you mentioned the collateral damage from the huge jobless rate and getting the rest of the world back to life. I think that's a lot bigger of an issue than the virus. Here are a couple of questions. Have ACIP members ever adjusted their decisions as a result to a heartfelt public comment or injury story?
Yeah, I think that's John Salomon's story. I think who was, you were there at that last
Yeah, I remember.
His son got polio from the polio vaccine. He was a major force. I mean, he eventually worked himself up, not only to be on the working group, I was the head of the polio work group. he became a consumer rep as a voting member on the ACIP. He had a legitimate vaccine safety issue. He was very good about making his case. He had
Right.
data on him, and so he was a powerful voice.
Yeah, I don't think they'd let me on, although I would add some color to the panel. Oh goodness. Right. Hey, you never know. Big dreams. There's a pediatric infectious disease physician who says that no child has ever died from a vaccine. Have you ever, do you feel that way? I don't believe you do, but.
No, just on the rotavirus vaccine, the RotaShield vaccine, when it first came out, there was a death associated with intussusception. Intussusception is potentially fatal disease. No, people can, the oral polio vaccine could cause polio, and polio can be fatal. No, the vaccines, I think anything that has a positive effect can have a negative effect, including a serious negative effect. Vaccines are no different.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I've definitely seen the negative effect. Didn't know it could happen. Saw it happen to my own children. We've had that talk several times about what's happened to my kids, and I know hundreds of thousands of people who have experienced similar things. So it is, I believe you kind of have to look at everything and figure out what's best for you. And I think that's where a lot of us, that's how you end up with people in the streets and at the Capitol, is when they start mandating this kind of stuff, just because if you've seen the injury, it is hard to understand how your choice is taken away when death could be something that could happen. So that's where I think a lot of people, misunderstand a lot of the freedom fighters who, we're really just, saying, hey, there's a risk to this. And if there's a risk, mandating that on a child who could be at even worse risk for something to happen afterwards, you really have to think about everyone and their, everyone's so different, their body's so different. So we really have to think about those sorts of things. Anyway, that's just something kind of trailing off of one of my other friends' questions here. So can you imagine a scenario where SARS or COVID-2 it would ever be mandated? Do you think that's possible? I really don't, but they're curious if you think that's something that could happen if people kind of reject it and don't want the vaccine.
I think it depends on when the vaccine, if there is a vaccine, when the vaccine comes out, what the threat is of that virus at that time. I mean, if it's like it is now, then the question becomes what it always becomes. So this is where you and I sort of have a fundamental difference is, is it your right to catch and transmit a potentially fatal infection? And although I'm very sympathetic to the notion that when you take away someone's choice to have to get a vaccine, knowing that any vaccine can have a side effect and any vaccine could potentially have a serious side effect, is that fair? But on the other side of that, I think of these children in our hospital who have leukemia or who can't be vaccinated. They depend on those around them to protect them. When things spread in the community, they're often the most vulnerable, the most likely to be hurt. And so is that your right? Is it your place in society to make sure that you protect not only your child, but those with whom they come in contact? And that is the fundamental dialogue that I think, exists between me and you. I appreciate that you're always nice about it, that you never say mean things about me, which is not true of many of the emails I get. So I do appreciate that. But I think that's where that's the difference. It's a hard question to answer. It's not, this is not so straightforward. It's hard to answer. It's why we struggle with it so much.
Right. And we really don't know what's going on with this. I guess for me personally, one of my children is one of those who are at risk, who are autoimmune. And so I don't, after what I've seen personally, me, I'll say it like it is. I personally don't think I could ever get another one, regardless of what it's for, after witnessing what I've witnessed and seeing what I've seen. It's just so scary. And to know that it could happen. And when it does, a lot of times you're not compensated the way you should be, or your family, like it all falls on you. My daughter's injury with hospital bills was over $70,000, they're not helping pay any of that, that all falls on me. So that's hard. That, becomes where it's like, if they're not going to help you, but it's their product, at some point it's got to be kind of like, if you're going to tell me I have to do this now, there's going to be some resistance. I would figure anybody would expect that out of a human being. That's just kind of human nature to rebel, especially if you have seen injury before. So
you do these podcasts from your home?
Yes, sir.
So are your kids around? I'd love to
No,
see.
sir. No, they're not. I usually do them when they're at their dad's right now. They'll be home Sunday. Yeah, I'll have to. I'd love for you to meet them. It's just that I never bring them to Atlanta because it's such a serious event that you know, you don't want to bring little children. But maybe one day. I think you actually got to meet my 18-year-old son. Our first ACIP meeting we met, but we didn't get to talk as much that meeting, so you guys didn't get to really chat. But one day you'll get to meet him, I'm sure.
My kids are because we're here and locked in with my wife, my son, my daughter's boyfriend, who's now stuck in a scared straight program for being part of our family, my nephew, my sister's son, and then his pregnant wife. So we have like 7 and a
Well,
half.
you have a house full. Well, unfortunately, COVID does not overrule the judgment that I have to give my children to their father biweekly. So even with lockdown, we have to exchange the children. That's just the way it goes, or they'd be here. We've been homeschooling. That's been interesting. Let me tell you, Paul, when it comes to nonsense words and Common Core, I've got to say I'm very lost. I have no idea how to do Common Core math, people, and I definitely do not understand teaching your children nonsense words before you teach them sight words. So they're like 2-letter to 3-letter words that aren't words, and they're sending her home with literally list of these type words like TUE or just weird things like that, and she's having to learn full list of words that aren't words. It is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Don't know, Paul. I don't understand why they're teaching my child how to read words that aren't words instead of words that are words. But I actually bought her a bunch of things from the internet just to teach her myself. So she's actually still learning real words while she's learning not real words. Not sure how that's what's going on in schools these days, but I was kind of surprised after having to homeschool for a few weeks here, you know, what's actually being taught. I'm more confused. Like she's explaining to me like sliders. 2 letters on a thing with an arrow pointing, and they're all called sliders. And it's like, here, you have to slide these to do that. I'm like, huh? Like my 6-year-old is now teaching me kindergarten stuff because I have no clue. So yeah, they're definitely teaching them different than we learned back in the day. It's very interesting. Oh man. But yours, I guess yours are older. You don't have to worry about any of that.
They're in their mid-20s. They're beyond nonsense words.
Yeah, my 20-year-old doesn't understand, but she at least is better at helping with homework than I am. So I guess she's a little closer to the new school than I am. But so let's see here. What is the difference about the mechanism behind how SARS-CoV-2 vaccine produces immunity compared to current vaccines licensed for use?
We don't know anything about it.
Have a clue, yeah. Don't have a clue yet. Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's see here. Dun, dun, dun. So this is from a friend of mine who actually comes to the CDC with me. My question is for Dr. Offit. 30% of the world's population does not have adequate water and 60% does not have adequate sanitation. Do you see prioritizing this absurdity as playing a major role in reducing the spread of this disease?
There are some diseases that are pretty much going to be affected by sanitation and others that won't. I mean, the hepatitis A is something that would be affected by hygiene and sanitation. Norovirus to some extent could be affected by sanitation and hygiene. Rotavirus, no. Flu, not really. I mean, and I think probably this is going to fall more in the flu category, that it really doesn't matter. These viruses are going to spread. I mean, every year in the United States, 15 to 20% of the hospitalizations we have for respiratory and viruses are human coronavirus. And so it's not exactly these novel coronaviruses, but it's similar. They're a similar group family of viruses. So I don't think sanitation or hygiene would matter, actually.
All right. So let's see. This is from one of my doctor buddies. It says in our first interview, Dr. Offit had said a few hundred people get meningitis per year. According to the incidence of meningococcal meningitis in this country, the risk of serious adverse vaccine events from the 2 meningococcal vaccines, conjugate and B, doesn't the risk of the vaccine injury considerably exceed the risk of getting meningitis?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not sure what data are being used there to say what the side effect rate is, but I mean, these are just, MenB is a sort of protein vaccine generally. The other meningococcal ACWY vaccines or conjugate vaccines, those are for the most part harmless vaccines. So I don't know what side effect profile he's talking about. You'd much rather get the vaccine than to get meningitis. We see meningitis in our hospital all the time. It's not a disease you want to get.
Yeah, and I've heard some horror stories about meningitis, and I've heard some horror stories about the vaccine. So I guess it's kind of a you know, one of those things you kind of got to decide for yourself what you want to do.
When Men Be First came out, there was a question about whether, or actually the Men ACWI, there was a question about whether it caused Guillain-Barré syndrome. It was released in New York. There happened to be, and so there was a question because then there was released in New York, there was this outbreak of sort of Guillain-Barré syndrome, but it was really associated with Campylobacter infection, natural Campylobacter infection, which is a known cause of Guillain-Barré syndrome. And so eventually that went away. I mean, that questionable side effect went away. But initially when that vaccine came out, it was feared that it could cause Guillain-Barré syndrome, but that didn't hold up.
All right. So I think this one's from a friend of mine. It says, it seems whenever any vaccine is added to the schedule at ACIP, it stays there for perpetuity. It says, do you think there should be an upfront criterion stated for the removal of a vaccine from the schedule? What would this look like for COVID-19? One thing I'm going to add to that is I did notice they have spoken on vaccines before that they said weren't really working, but they still decided not to pull those vaccines from the schedule. They instead did wordsmithing and talked about the word recommended. Do we just not say recommended now and say you can use it, but it's, you know, not as good as this one? Like, they spent over an hour on this. So I do think this question is a good question to ask.
What are you talking about when you say not working? When you said the vaccine wasn't working, which vaccine are you talking about?
I think that one was something 13, maybe I don't remember, maybe Prevnar 13. I can't remember right off. I'll have to go back and look at the videos and I'll tell you for sure. But that was just this question made me think of that because I remember being in the room and they were talking about one of the I can't remember if it was for.
You're talking about, it was probably Prevnar 13 for older adults, whether it worked for older adults, because what happened, right, to introduce that vaccine for children, the incidence dropped in older adults. The question is, with giving it in older adults, did that further cause decrease? And it didn't seem to. So therefore the question is, do you need to still recommend it for older adults? And that's when the wordsmithing came. I think that's probably what you're talking about. I think I'd like to think, I mean, we stopped giving a smallpox vaccine to children in the early 1970s when we had largely eliminated smallpox from the face of the earth. 2 of the 3 types of polio are gone. Only type 1 remains. It's in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I think when we eliminate type 1 virus from Afghanistan and Pakistan, we can stop giving the polio vaccine. Those are the 2 that are you know, rinderpest was a measles virus for cattle that pretty much eliminated the disease from cattle. So we stopped giving rinderpest vaccine to cattle. So I mean, we'll stop giving vaccines in perpetuity, certainly. And we're close to polio. So these other, I mean, could we eliminate measles from the face of the earth? Absolutely. Could we stop giving a measles vaccine once we eliminate it? Absolutely. We could.
One of the things I've heard is that with polio in America, we're really only seeing the vaccine strain of polio in people if we do see it.
Well, the inactivated vaccine now. So the vaccine associated paralytic polio has been gone since 2000. The last 20 years. Back to the inactivated vaccine.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. I think that's pretty much most of my questions. I wanted to ask you if you have anything else you want to say to to everyone about COVID-19, coronavirus, hysteria, panic, economy, any of it. Like, is there anything else you'd like to add that, you've been thinking on? Because I know you definitely are someone everyone's been seeking out. I know the last time we spoke, you spoke to the White House, me and the governor's office. So is there anything else you'd like to add that maybe we don't know that we should know, or anything like that, Paul?
I enjoyed talking to you the most that day, actually, but we talked to Deborah Birx. It was funny when we talked to Deborah Birx, who's a doctor, and she's sort of an old HIV researcher. But before we got on the call, our public relations people got on with us and said, don't call her Dr. Birx, don't call her Dr. Deborah Birx, don't call her Deborah, call her Ambassador Birx. Ambassador, basically they went over and over this because now it's a White House person. They were scared that we were going to say something stupid. So we got on this, me and one other guy really were going to be talking to her. So we got on the phone and waiting for her. She was about a minute late, and she gets on and she goes, hi, it's Debbie. It's like, after all that, I mean, she was just like a regular, normal human being. So
hey, how's it going, guys? Like, yeah, that's hilarious. You're trying to get ready to be so formal, and it's like, hey, it's Debbie. How's it going? That's great.
I know because now that we're all sheltered in place, there was a video that sort of went viral of a woman is asking a man. She says, okay, which of the 2 choices do you choose if you had to be quarantined? A, to be quarantined with your wife and children, or B, and he says B. He doesn't wait for the actual, what the choice is. B, whatever.
Whatever option B is, I don't care. It has to be better. Hey, there are a lot of people who probably feel that way out here right now. I'm sure it's been rough. Oh, goodness gracious. I'm kind of glad that, I'm not going through that. It's nice. My house is very peaceful right now. So I'm glad I'm not going through that like a lot of people. I would have been there had this been a few years ago for sure. So I'm glad that, at least this hit whenever I've had in a better place in my life for sure. I do. And it's sad because a lot of people are suffering right now. And it isn't funny, but it is, it is sad. A lot of people are suffering. Seeing domestic violence go up like this just because there are a lot of people who do butt heads, and it's hard to go through their daily life and their marriage as it is, seeing each other only those few hours a day. So when you confine them to a house with each other, 24 hours a day, it's bound to become explosive at some point. So, and it's so sad because I have a lot of friends who are police officers, and they're telling me, they're not getting out to a lot of calls. Like, they're telling me that they were told, unless it's an extreme emergency, stay home. Like, it has to be someone dying basically before they're supposed to respond. Now, everything's supposed to be dealt with through the dispatch, and the dispatch just talking to folks on the phone, trying to walk them through these emergencies. And so, it is kind of interesting to see how things are changing, and it's just kind of sad. And I really do hope we get back to, as normal as possible soon. I don't know I think there's going to be a new normal. I don't think we're going to go back to the way it used to be. It's going to be very interesting to see.
I think people are shaking hands.
Yeah, I think, we've definitely made it to the next era of elbow bumping or something, that's the new handshake, Paul. It's going to be everybody bumping elbows. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I guess there's probably less germs on your elbows than your hands. Oh my goodness.
Next ACIP, I hope there is a next ACIP meeting in person, but we'll see.
Yeah, let's hope so. I'm really curious to see how this goes. I know it's supposed to be, I think, June 24th and 25th or somewhere around that time frame. So maybe there's time for things to lighten up and get better. And if not, hopefully it'll be October. But I'll be, if they don't allow us to come in, I'll be on the front row at my own house watching. Oh my goodness. It makes me sad if they don't let us in. I've been to so many now, and it's like, for me, it's so interesting to see how everything's done. I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested from the public, no matter what your view is, just to see how things work. It is interesting to see kind of how they do things, and get to meet the people. And, it used to be a lot more fun before they put the velvet rope up. I'm not going to lie. Getting to actually converse with other, people and talk to the panelists and stuff, because a lot of them are very friendly and didn't have a problem conversing. So, that was a lot more fun when we were able to do that. Now, I hate the velvet rope, but I don't think it's coming down anytime soon. So, we just seem to meet at the rope and talk. So, hopefully at some point, maybe we can all get to the point where they understand that there's not going to be any violence or anything crazy, and that, maybe we can intermingle again a little bit better. But your invite still stands to sit next to me on the front row. You're always welcome on my side of the rope. I don't know that I'm allowed on your side of the rope. I don't think they'll allow that. I might get tackled. But yeah, Department of Homeland Security is there for a reason, I guess. Might as well give them something to do. Oh my goodness. Well, Paul, I so appreciate you for coming on with me today and talking to me. I know you've got a million other interviews and things to do and people to talk to. So I just want to thank you and tell you, you're appreciated. And I know everybody may not agree with everything, and we do disagree on some things, but that's okay. That doesn't change the fact we're able to be human beings and cordial. Please, everyone else, take note of that and do the same thing. We've just seen so much out here that just causes so many issues. So let's all try to take something away from this and treat each other better. I love you, my friend, and have an amazing weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Stay safe.
All right, you too. Bye. All right, you guys. Well, that was me talking with Dr. Paul Offit on Tough Love with Lynette today. I tried to get in all your questions, as many as I could. You guys are, as I said, we are not always going to agree on everything, and that's okay. I've been building this friendship with Paul for a long time now, and I have taken a lot of flack for it. I've even been death threatened for having a friendship with him, not only by both sides. So, I want to say, I really do hope that we can start looking at these lines of communication and opening them up and talking to each other more. I do think it helps us get somewhere. And treating each other like human beings. It really is important. To see each other as monsters or as numbers or as statistics or any of those things, it really doesn't get any side anywhere. You know, nobody gets anywhere that way. To even go with pro versus anti, still really seems like it has a very negative impact on what our actual goal is here. So I really do hope that we start trying to bridge that gap and talk to each other more, and you know, just try to understand each other and understand both sides and talk out these things. You know, me being able to speak to Paul is one thing, but I would love to have him eventually feel comfortable enough to speak to some of my friends who are doctors and people on this side who have a lot more of this information than I do. So, you know, small steps, baby steps, whatever. These are starts. I'm doing the best I can out here. I love you all. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Please don't stay out there panicking. You know, I'm a firm believer that it's really time to get back to work out here and get back to life. You know, and so, oh, it's just time, folks. This country shut down has lasted long enough. You know, I'm no doctor, I'm no scientist, so I'm not telling you what to do. But as a mom and as a American citizen, I'm just tired of sitting at home. I'm sure lots of you feel that way. So anyway, guys, I'm going to go. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for being a part of it. You're more than welcome to share this. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And thank you, Paul Offit, once again, for being a part of it and sharing your information and your point of view. Everybody have a great weekend.